Hi, hello, and welcome to today's session of Research Methods for Business. And for today, we will be looking at ethnography and what this means for research. Now, in this workshop, we will be able to distinguish between ethnography and participant observational methods. And we'll try and briefly examine the origins of ethnography as a data gathering method. And we'll try to see how we can actually plan and conduct an ethnographic fieldwork by looking at how we can actually select the field, plan to gain access, and try to establish rapport with our participants. So that takes us to our first question of the day. What is ethnography? Well, ethnography is a branch of anthropology, and it is a systematic study of individual cultures. Now, ethnography kind of explores cultural phenomena from the point of view of the subjects of the study. Now, ethnography can also be defined as a type of social research which involves examining the behavior of participants in a given social situation and also understanding the group members' own interpretations of such behavior. So if we quickly take a look at this slide, so ethnography in a piece-by-piece approach is a type of research strategy. It is time-consuming. It takes time. It is very, very time-consuming. And like I said, it draws from the field of anthropology. Ethnography is very inductive. Being a qualitative research, right? A qualitative research, it is inductive approach, right? Of course, it takes place over an extended period of time. And with regards to ethnography, what you find is the ability of the researcher to immerse themselves into the social world being researched. They immerse themselves into the social world of the actors in which they are examining. And of course, ethnography takes that naturalistic approach whereby the goal is to research the phenomenon within the context in which it occurs. Right, so in explaining ethnography in detail, right, the origins of ethnography draws from anthropology, or what we call social cultural anthropology. And this emerged far back in the 19th century. But of course, ethnography has evolved so that to date it is used across a number of disciplines in communications, in management, in education, in medical sciences. And the goal, like I mentioned in ethnography, is to study culture, is to study individual cultures and the cultural phenomenon from the point of view of the subject of the study. Now, ethnography, of course, is synonymous with qualitative research, and the goal is to seek to understand cultural phenomena that kind of reflects the knowledge, right, and the experiences and the meanings and the interpretations that guide the life of a certain group of people or a certain cultural group of people within their own context or within their own social world. So I like these definitions from Hammersley and Atkinson and from Willits and Trondman. So let's look at that of Willits and Trondman, right? They define ethnography as a family of methods which involves sustained social contact with the participants, right? And writing up the encounter and respecting, recording, and representing at least partly in its own terms the irreducibility of human experience. Now, a very good definition again from Hammersley and Atkinson. They define ethnography as that particular set of methods in its most characteristic form that involves you, the ethnographer or the researcher, participating overtly, right, or covertly in people's life for an extended period of time. And in doing this, you are watching what happens, you are listening to what is being said, you are asking questions, you are probing in order to uncover a particular phenomena. Now, of course, the purpose of ethnography, right, is to explain the social world from the lens of the subjects, right? To examine the social world from the lens of the participants or the local actors and kind of understand the way they would describe and explain it. Now, if you seek to use ethnography, right, the goal is, of course, to probe. The goal is to gain insight. The goal is to examine the behavior of participants in a given social situation and understanding the group members' interpretations. But of course, if there are certain points or certain issues to consider, right? With regards to ethnography, first you must be able to negotiate the full access. And I remember when I traveled to Africa to conduct some ethnography research, it was quite difficult getting access because if you do recall what I mentioned a few weeks ago, that the respondents or the participants or those members of that group of culture, they didn't trust me because they didn't really know my intentions. They thought I was a member of the government of the police force or the tax agents or a member of the Nigerian government, right? So there was that difficulty in getting access. But of course, with time, I had to build that rapport and I was able to negotiate full access. But of course, in building that rapport, there must also be a high degree of trust. They must trust you. They must trust your intentions. They must trust the reason why you are conducting your research. So there must be that clarity. But of course, clarity is defined on trust. And trust is a set of expectations shared by you and the participants, right? And of course, for ethnographic research, you must be able to define or determine a group of people that would help you best achieve your research objective or help you answer your research question. So these are kind of the key points you need to consider in undertaking an ethnographic research. Now, I wouldn't delve too much into this, but of course the origins, like we mentioned, come from Bronislaw Manilowski, and in his seminal work, right, he tries to explain the process of gathering data, and that the gathering of data can be done meticulously through observations and interviews. And what Bronislaw identified was that it's quite important that by understanding different cultures, that you as the observer or you as the anthropologist, you must have that daily contact, that daily interaction with the participants. And of course, in having that daily interaction, you must be able to immerse yourself into the real world, right? So you are able to immerse yourself into the real world, and with that, you are able to view their narratives, you're able to view their experiences through their lens, right? Through the way they provide those narratives, right? So, like I mentioned, ethnography builds or draws from anthropology, right? Then emerged was pioneered by the Chicago School in the 20s, moved on to the 30s, and of course to the 40s, right? So I won't delve too much into the origins. It's quite important to differentiate between ethnography and participant observation, and I see a lot of students kind of struggle with this, but it's quite easy, so there's really no reason to fret, right? No, so an easy way to always remember is that ethnography is a science, right? Ethnography is a science or a branch of anthropology, right, that studies cultures and society. So I think that's an apt and easy definition, right? Ethnography is a science that studies cultures and societies, right? So I think that's easy. You won't forget that, right? While participant observation is one of the methods of undertaking ethnography, right? Ethnography is a science that studies cultures and societies, with participant observation being one of its methods. Now, ethnography again is a strategy or a field of study, right? While participant again is a method of research or a method of data collection, right? So participant observation is one of the methods for undertaking ethnography. Participant observation is a method of research or data collection. So quickly, key differences, right? Ethnography, of course, occurs over lengthy periods, right? And it refers to you being able to immerse yourself into the real world, right? While if you're going to use only participant observation, right, it involves shorter periods in the field and refers more to a particular method of gathering information through direct observation, right? With ethnography, again, refers to the outcome of the research process in a written account. So you must give a detailed expression or a detailed interpretations of what you have examined, of the behavior of the participants that you've examined. But the key area or the key aspect you want to know about ethnography is that it involves lengthy periods of time spent in the field. So if we look at the fieldwork aspect, right, of ethnography, I think that is the defining part of ethnography, the fact that you will have to be in the field. And so that is a picture of me being in the field, undertaking my research a couple of years ago, right? And I think with a classic ethnographic study, you could look at between 6 to 2 years, right, or even more in most cases. I've seen 5-year ethnography studies, and I think that's what you get with the classic ones. But with the modern ones, right, I think the modern ones are kind of diluted in a way, right? And the researcher often stays about 2 weeks, every few months. And in so doing, this kind of lasts around 2 or 3 years, right? But I think the defining element of ethnography is that it is time consuming and it involves a lot of field work. So I put down some tips, right, for ethnography, right? So of course you've got to select the field, and I think given the fact that it is qualitative research and it is time consuming and intensive, right, it is quite important to understand the site you're going to, right, and you need to also be able to capture the right sample that will help you achieve your research objectives, right? And I like to use case studies, right, right, so that I'm able to understand particular cases or particular people put in cases, and I do within case or cross case analysis to understand the commonalities and the differences, right? So for ethnographic research, you must be able to define the field, right? What's the particular field and the particular sample that will help you capture the rich narratives or the rich experiences that you seek to examine, or that would help you achieve your research objectives. Now, one of the challenges I had when I traveled to Africa was, like I mentioned, is the gaining access. It's quite difficult, right? Very, very difficult. Of course, I had one or two informants that led me, but it was still difficult getting access, right? Because one, you had to build that rapport, and of course, you also had to build that trust, right? It's quite easier when you've got personal contacts, right? Or people within that cultural setting that can actually give you access or introduce you through snowballing to one or two key people that will provide you with access, right? So it's good if I have an informant who has some knowledge, right, and someone who kind of understands the culture and that people know. So it gives you a strong opportunity to be able to examine or interview or investigate the participants, right? And once you're able to gain access, once you're able to get an informant, once you're able to build trust, right, it offers humongous benefits, as the respondents or the participants will be free with you. They'll be able to express their narratives, and they'll be able to provide written interpretations that will help you achieve your research objective. Now, with every good research, right, there must be ethical considerations, and ethical considerations involves gaining informed consent, right? So with gaining informed consent means you providing details about your research and gaining their permission, right? So here, in most cases, you have to describe the overall purpose of the research, right? You've got to tell the participants why they are involved in the research, what is their purpose, right? Tell them why they've been selected, right? It's quite good to always put this in plain terms, right? Explain the procedures, including the amount of time that is required for the research, right? State the risks, right? State the discomforts, right? It's always good to be very clear, right? And of course, you must always mention that the participants may withdraw at any time of the research if they don't feel very comfortable. Now, in terms of becoming visible, right, you as a researcher, right, or you, the ethnographer, you can actually choose to become invisible due to the length of time that you are involved in a project. Now, by immersing yourself into the norms and behaviors of the group being investigated, right, you can simply be invisible by hiding the fact that you are a researcher. Now, invisibility for you as an ethnographer means that the participant cease to be consciously aware of your presence, right? They cease to be unaware of your presence, right? They know you are there, but of course they cease to be consciously unaware of your presence, and with that, they're able to act more naturally, right? So a researcher may become invisible due to the length of time they're involved in the project, because now you've been able to build trust. Now they've been able to build rapport with you. They've allowed you into their real world, right? And invisibility means that the participants cease to be consciously aware of your presence, and they act more comfortably, they act naturally, they're quite comfortable with you, so they do things as normal, as if you were not there. Right? Building rapport, right? Very important, right? If you don't build rapport, it's difficult to win trust. It's difficult to capture the rich narratives. It is difficult to understand the group members' own interpretations of their social behavior. So for you as an ethnographer or a researcher, you must be able to develop that close interpersonal relationship with the participants, right? Or the key informants, based, of course, on trust, based on mutual respect, and of course, of shared understandings. I like this concept, reflexivity, and for me, it's a very rich concept. And I like to use the definition by Virginia England, and she defines ethnography as a self-introspection whereby you're able to immerse yourself into the real world of the local actors, right? And through that approach, you are able to reveal insights about the research. Now, by adopting reflexivity, right, you're telling the story. You're removing every element of bias, right? And you report the evidences or the narratives fairly, right? You are not coloring it in any way. You're removing your bias in it, right? And you're reporting the evidence clearly, right, during the various stages of the study. Right, so because what you find out with most ethnographic study, and this is one of the criticisms of ethnography, is that how is it possible for the researcher to maintain that professional distance, or for them to remove that element of bias, right? And the real way, or the very true way, is for the researcher to evoke that reflexivity, right, as a resource in uncovering a deep-seated but poorly recognized aspect of a given research. So with reflexivity, what you're trying to do is you are trying to report every evidence that you've uncovered fairly. You've removed any preconceived bias, right? And you're reporting it fairly as it should be, right? So limiting bias can be minimized through reflexivity, right? And with reflexivity, you are being on guard, right? You are being on guard about certain bias or preconceptions, right, which you as a researcher might introduce into the study. So for data gathering, right, of course you need field notes, right? Like I say, the pen is mightier than the sword, so it's quite easy to forget, right? So you need your field notes, right? You need your audio recorder, right? You need your diaries, right, to record personal feelings or events. Of course, through interviews, you are asking questions, but interviews can only be recorded effectively with your audio recorder. Some researchers or ethnographers use visual methods, right, which they believe that in some instances, some findings may not be able to be best captured through textual interpretations alone. So they kind of use some kind of digital media, right, that helps provide a comprehensive approach in capturing the real worlds of the researcher and the participants. But the key items you need: your field notes, your diaries, your audio recorder, sometimes your camera. Well, it depends, but of course you always need to seek consent. Now, there are a couple of ethical considerations, right? I think some of the key considerations for ethnography is that there is a challenge that when you publish, right, some of the researchers or some of the participants might come and say, well, this is not what we said, right? And they might feel offended with your post or your publications, right? Right. So, and also with ethnography, it's often very difficult to anonymize the names of the participant. But of course, with every good research, you must protect the identity of the researcher. So you must be able to remove the identifying information about the participants at the earliest opportunities. And in most cases, you use pseudonyms or fake names, right? You use pseudonyms to protect the identity, and I do that a lot. right? To remove any details or any relevant identifying materials that about the settings, right, or about the individuals to reduce the danger of that anonymity being breached. So, in a nutshell, right, ethnography, right, is a qualitative research that seeks to understand cultural phenomena. It is a branch of anthropology, right, and it's also a systematic study of individual cultures. Ethnography explores cultural phenomena from the point of view of the subject of the study. It is a type of research which involves examining the behavior of participants in a given social situation and understanding the group members' own interpretations of that social behavior. Ethnography may also involves ethical considerations. You must ensure you get consent, right, and provide the purpose of the research to the participants, right? Ethnography also demands that not only do researchers immerse themselves in the field work, in the field, but they also act reflexively when collecting data. Acting reflexively means removing every form of bias, right? And ethnography, the difference between ethnography and participant observation is that ethnography is a strategy or a science that studies cultures and societies, while participant observation can be defined as one of the methods of ethnography, right? Or is a method of research or a method of data collection. Okay, thank you and speak to you soon.